In this video, I'm gonna show you the process of creating an image like this one. This is a diagram I used to explain a concept during a postgrad course presentation I was enrolled in last year. It's a mix of a diagram with a realistic render style that also feels like a real physical model, and on top of that, there's the hand gesture with some exaggerations that help to emphasize the concept even more. So let's break down this process. Now, I could go more in-depth into this project and explain all of the other images my team and I used to present this, but in this video I'm gonna focus on this specific one and show you all the steps that go into achieving a result like this. Oh, and an important piece of information is that this is a mixed-use building where the intermediate floors are residential and they have a dedicated access core. Our goal on this studio's assignment was to focus mainly on the public/civic uses. That's why the residential units are displayed as generic, if you will. The building was designed and modeled using ArchiCAD in a very basic way. Then I exported to Sketchup to use Vray and then finalized it in Photoshop to really bring this image together. It was some of a quick process where I decided to use very simple materials and try to add as many of the elements on the render to save time. Now, the first important step is to set up a scene. I knew I wanted to give a realistic feel to the image, but also be a diagram in a sense that it's easy to visually understand it. So for those reasons, I used a very wide camera angle, something like 80mm, so that it took most of the perspective distortion out of it. And then I also made sure to use a 2-point perspective to ensure that all verticals are in fact vertical. Not to mention that the image aspect ratio is square to match the other diagrams I also created. And because it makes a lot of sense for this building as well. And all of this adds to give that physical model look to the image. The public floors are for a communal kitchen and restaurant, as well as some multi-use spaces, plus a vertical indoor garden that connects all of the floors, both public and private, so that the residential units can also grow stuff, and this green connection goes all the way to the top floors, where there's a cafe and a basketball court. So to indicate this indoor garden and again emphasize the concept, I made what would be a void space solid and extruded even past the dedicated space. I knew I wanted to insert a hand there, but I didn't really know how well that would work out. So this extra extrusion would allow me some creative flexibility to play later in Photoshop. Here are some other tweaks I did to the model. I gave a slight separation between the residential and public. This is so that this difference is even more visible. I rounded the indoor garden shape and added a couple of 3D people. If you've been following this channel for some time, you know that I like to do people in Photoshop where I have much more control. But since there was gonna be a light glowing from the vertical garden solid and time was a major factor in this process, and also since they needed to have this diagrammatic look with a single material, adding them in 3D was the best and easier choice. There are a couple of windows, furniture and other things that I simplified and or excluded. I had this poetic license, if you will, to do this since I was already exaggerating on a couple of other things. And after all, this project was supposed to be delivered in a very preliminary stage. In this postgrad program, we were discussing a lot of other things, and the building itself and its detailing weren't really the main goal. Oh, and by the way, this project was in Chicago, and the studio had Iker Gil as one of the curators, and this building was part of a larger assignment. Okay, the model is taken care of. Let's take a look at the rendering settings and materials. But now, just before we talk about it, if you're new to the channel, I'm Oliver, and here we talk about architectural representation and visualization. Consider subscribing if you like this type of content. We also offer premium courses where I really go in-depth into essential architecture skills. Our latest course that was just launched is about portfolios, where I cover both the technical part of InDesign, but also the visual and more conceptual things that make a great portfolio. There's a link in the video description for you to check out all of this. Now, the rendering process. As I mentioned, I used the Vray for SketchUp and tried to keep the materials simple. The more complex one, I guess, is the emissive. I started with this LED super green. This is from the ready-to-use library from Vray Cosmos. Then changed the color to match what I had in mind and bumped up the intensity to 10. This value was only set once I had all of the lighting and other settings in place. Then I created a translucent material for the facade. This is what our team had envisioned for the external facade. so a diagram that was very translucent is what I was looking for. I played with the diffuse texture using this expanded metal sheet and the opacity until I had the result I wanted. And then the green paint had just a little bit of a reflection, and that's it. Materials are a trial and error type of process, especially with this sort of fake physical model, so do lots of test renders. Then, lighting. This is a vital step. If you use the standard Vray Sun or any other render engine, the generic light, you won't have the same result. It needs to feel that this is lit up by an interior light source. So I turned off the sunlight and added a dome light with an interior HDRI. Vray Cosmos has a bunch of options, but this one I downloaded from HDRI Haven, if I'm not mistaken, and it's free. In my case here, 35 on the intensity worked great, but just as with most settings here, each project and file will demand different values, so always test it out. We're almost finished with the rendering process. I added an infinite plane so that this feels like we're one of those product shooting scenarios. And then on the overall settings, I switched to CPU render, bumped up to medium plus on the quality, activated the denoiser, and increased the image width and height to 3000. Oh, and since I had so many materials that came imported from ArchiCAD that I really didn't want to deal with, I switched to material override and only opted out on the materials I created to not be overridden. This was a lazy move to take care of the rest of the materials. Then finally, it was render time. Just don't forget to add the render elements, they will help you with the post-production step. I usually add way more than I actually need, just in case. And for example, by chance, I discovered this Cryptomate, which turned out to be quite handy, as you will see later. Okay, render is ready. It looks somewhat dull compared to the final result, but here in Photoshop is where the magic happens. So let me break down the Photoshop file for you. I'm going to start turning on one layer at a time and explaining everything about it. So I started adding some reflections to the floor. This could have been done back in the rendering quite easily, but I completely forgot. And only here I realized how important this was. Obviously, on a rough surface, a reflection wouldn't really exist, but I'm assuming this is indeed a slightly reflective surface. Then after that, I fixed some things. These inner parts that weren't deleted back in the 3D were creating unnecessary noise, and instead of going back to the render, re-rendering everything, it was easier just to fix it here in Photoshop. I added a levels adjustment to add more contrast to the render, and then started working on the green neon element. Two things here. It's obviously overexposed, as you can see, so we need to take care of that, but also it feels too solid for my taste. I wanted more of a translucent lit thing, so I repainted over to create the look I want. Again, I could have done this with Vray by tweaking and testing multiple times, but it takes literally less than 5 minutes here in Photoshop, and in Vray a lot more. Mainly because I would have to figure out how to achieve this effect, and even after multiple tests and waiting for the render to be ready, it had a chance that this might not be on the intensity that I was looking for. Now I used render elements to help me with this step. I copied portions of it, desaturated it, and changed the blend mode to multiply. Always test different opacity percentages to fine-tune the result. And here it is, we can now sort of see the inner walls. This is very subtle, exactly what I was looking for. This adds a lot more detail to this important piece, and it will look better once we add the hand. It feels like a proper three-dimensional object instead of that opaque shape. Alright, next, the hand. This depends on so many factors, so the exact hand that I'm using here won't really fit your needs, but just Google for hand PNG, hand holding PNG, hand grabbing PNG, see the related images, and you will probably find the one that you're looking for. Copy and paste into Photoshop file to test to see if the perspective, the proportions, and the gesture actually fit your image. Oh, and of course you can use your own hand, just take a photo of it and import into Photoshop. But then once you know it can be used, take extra care in cutting it out. I like to use masks so that it's a non-destructive process all along, and I can refine the masking if needed down the road. The forearm wasn't long enough, as you can see, so I extended using the content-aware fill. Just create a selection, then in a new layer, go to Edit and Content-Aware Fill. Then sample the areas that can be used to fill it. This takes a bit of time to fully understand it, but it's such a powerful tool that I highly recommend checking it out. I use it all the time, to be honest. Okay, so the hand was taking form, it was actually looking good, but I then felt that the color was distracting too much from the actual diagram, so I decided to go black and white. Alright, so this is looking better, but it doesn't have any of the bouncing lights that it should have, right? So I created a hue and saturation adjustment layer, checked colorize, and made it full bright green. I then inverted the mask and started painting on it with white where the highlight would be. It was here on the thumb side and the index finger, some on the rest of the fingers, and from my understanding, on the forearm as well. And then to correct the shadows, I added an adjustment layer that made everything darker, more contrasty, but then masked it out to the top of the forearm only. This also made the overall contrast more in sync with the render itself. Oh, and lastly, don't forget that the actual green bar needs touch shadows and also show through a little bit. Perfect. Now to finish it off, I added a camera raw filter to the whole thing to really fine-tune some of the colors and overall contrast. This is a mandatory step in any architecture image. Personally, it takes it to a whole nother level. And remember that CryptoMake render element that I mentioned? I combined all of them into a single image and threw them here at the end to give even more depth to the translucent slabs. I simply tested a bunch of blend modes and saw that soft light gave an interesting effect. I don't know exactly what this CryptoMake is, but it has a bit of contour, a bit of feel. It's not always that this makes sense, but by tweaking the colors and playing with blend modes, I found out that it can be used in interesting ways. And that concludes this process. If you enjoy videos like this, let me know in the comments below. I feel that by skipping some of the very basic and repetitive, boring steps, I can focus on some key moves that bring a lot of value to you guys. Don't forget to give this video a like, it really helps the channel, I appreciate it. And if you want to continue learning architectural visualization and representation, check out this other video here.